we're gonna have the standards talk. So starting off, what are standards in the first place? The way I like to view standards is it's like the bar that things have to be at in order to be in your life. So standards can apply to friends, standards can apply to your relationships, standards can apply to yourself. Whatever it is, that's the minimum of what you're willing to accept is your standard. You will not accept any lower than that, but you will accept at that level and higher. You can think of standards as gatekeepers. So your standards are these almost like guardians, these gatekeepers, and for whatever standard you set, they're looking at the people that might come into your life or the way that you're operating in your life, and they're going, oh, does this match the standard? Does this match what we want? If the answer is no, then it says get out. But if the answer is yes, it's like, all right, welcome in. So standards are used to help filter out what you don't want and to allow into your life what it is that you do want. Something to look out for with standards is to make sure that you're filtering for the right things. So let's just say that your standard is that you want a guy who brings a lot of excitement into your life. You want him to make your life fun and vibrant and exciting. That's your standard. You have your gatekeepers, that's the standard. And they're saying, so this guy that we just met is exciting. He meets the standard. Let's allow him into our life. You gave your standards the job of having guys who bring excitement into your life enter your life. And they did just that. But what they couldn't have accounted for is that what you find exciting is guys that are hot and cold. Guys that kind of just leave you hanging, you don't know what's going on in the relationship. Guys who engage in really risky behavior. If that's what you find exciting, but at the same time you claim you don't want a toxic relationship, your standards can't protect you because they weren't filtering for all of the right things. Let's say you want a guy who makes a lot and works really hard. Your standards are in place. They are ready to kick out people who do not meet that and allow in the people who do meet that. So you end up getting a guy who does just that. He works hard and he makes a lot. But what if it turns out that what you really need in a relationship is a lot of quality time with your loved person? You find out you thought you wanted these things, and maybe you do, but you also really need a lot of time and for your partner to physically be there with you often. Your standard gatekeepers could not have helped you get what you wanted because you didn't have the standards in place. You didn't give them that instruction to look out for somebody who would be fully available for you in that way. Your standards can only get you what you really want if you understand what you need. So your standards are only as good as your understanding of yourself. How do you know if it's time to upgrade your standards or change them around? One way is if you are finding in relationships that you're attracting the same types of people, the same types of problems over and over and over again. There's a pattern there. And if you can recognize that, you can figure out what's the standard that needs to be in place to stop this from happening? What's the work that needs to be done so that you can stop attracting that kind of person? If you're realizing that you are completely different from the people that you are entering into relationships with, and not in a good differences way, in a incompatibilities way, then maybe standards are needed so you can have someone more closely aligned with your life. If you find that people don't treat you well in relationships, obviously they have no right to be doing that. But it's also worth thinking, how is it that I'm allowing them to do this? What are my standards that are clearly not keeping these people out of my life? Now let's talk about low and high standards. What is low standards versus high standards? Both low and high standards can get a bad rep because low standards sounds like a bad thing. It sounds like you're accepting the bar that's on the ground. It doesn't sound like a good thing. And the high standards, that can sound like it's unreasonable. It's just high, it's up in the clouds, it's way out there. Standards aren't good or bad for being high or low. My view of it is that standards, being high or low, is purely based off of how easy it is for most people to reach them. If a bunch of people can reach and step over the bar that is your standards, then those would be lower standards. If there are a lot fewer people and it's a lot less likely for you to find somebody who meets those standards, then those would be high standards. It's high, a lot of people aren't able to jump over it, some people are. High standards. Let's say that your standard for making a friend is that anybody can be your friend as long as they're a nice person. I'd like to say that that's a lower standard. There's a lot of people out there who can be nice, and hopefully it's easy to jump over that bar. They just have to be nice and that's it. If your standard is that you only want friends in your life that have similar values to you and are the kind of person that you look up to, that could be a little bit of a higher standard. There are going to be less people that share the same values of you, so that kind of dwindles down the pool. There might not be a ton of people who also would be the kind of person that you'd look up to. So if you can imagine it, it's kind of like a filter. The more criteria you add on, the less things are going to show up, but the things that do show up are going to be closer to what you want when you have more and more standards. If you accept walk in the park first dates, almost anybody can meet that. Anybody can go to the park with you and then walk around. So that it would be a lower standard because more people are able to easily meet that. If you only accept Michelin star restaurant dates, then that would be a higher standard. There are a few people that may be willing and able to do that. That raises the bar. That makes it so that less people meet that standard. That makes it a higher standard. High standards aren't automatically good, low standards aren't automatically bad. It's ultimately a matter of preference. What works for you? What treatment do you want? What life do you want? What makes you happy? If you're the kind of person who's perfectly fine to go out to the park to have a first date with somebody, then by all means, go for it. If it gets you the results that you are wanting, then go for it. When it comes to relationships, it's important to have matching standards. You don't want to drag your partner to meet your standards or feel like you never are able to meet theirs. So in dating, make sure that standards match up from the start to avoid a whole lot of problems in the future. So what does this look like? Let's say that your standard is no going home with a guy on a first date. You meet a guy, you have a great time, and then he starts pushing at the end of the date for you to go to his house. Now, it's clear that he does not share the same standard as you. This doesn't mean that you give up your standard because he thinks it's too high and go home with him. This doesn't mean that you sit there explaining to him for 5 hours why your standard is the right way of doing things. What you should do is leave and then find somebody who matches that same standard of yours of not going home with somebody on a first date. Now, you might be saying, what if they're okay with the standard I set, but they don't personally agree with it? They're accepting of my standard, but they're not on the same terms. Here's something that can happen. Let's say you meet a guy whose standard is exercising every day. He makes it clear that he prefers to be with somebody who does some kind of exercising. Now, you don't exercise at all, but you two end up in a relationship together. There were sparks flying and everything, so you have a relationship now. Let's say that as things go along, he gets more and more irritated about the fact that you don't do any kind of exercise. And you feel upset that you're not what he wants anymore, it feels like, and he's trying to change who you are. This is what can happen when somebody goes into a relationship with someone that didn't actually match their standards, or they didn't realize what their standards were at the time, or they didn't hold their standards. So this is why it's important to find somebody who's a match. Going back to the previous example, let's say that the guy who was trying to get you to come to his house, he's like, I get it, you don't want to go to the house on the first date, that's fine. But what can happen is he agreed no going home on the first date. That's not really his standard, but is yours. And he's accepting that for the time being. But then further down along the line, you're still not ready to go to his house. And he's increasingly pushing for it because he wasn't on the same terms with you. He was just kind of falling back for a little bit to maybe try to get you to like him more, get more comfortable so that you'd be ready for that. If somebody's not on the same page as you, you do run the risk of that push-pull kind of complication in a relationship. Going back again to the exercise example, the guy who found it important for his partner to do some kind of exercising should have held that standard in dating and chosen to only get into a relationship with somebody who did some kind of exercising. Now, sometimes it takes life happening to teach you what it is that you want in life and what your standards are. I remember When I was younger, I had a relationship where there was chemistry, we had similar interests. I was in school at the time, so we had a class together. We just had all of these things pushing us together. But as time went on and I started maturing as a person, I started realizing that I was going in one direction. I had a lot of ambitions, a lot of things I wanted for my life, and an upwards direction I want to go. And his growth was simply a little bit different. I found myself pulling him to try and get him to be on the same path. It felt like almost like dragging somebody along by a chain is how it felt. And that's just what it's like when you're with somebody who isn't right for you, but you didn't have the standards to filter them out beforehand. So I tried and tried, but things were going in different directions, and eventually it just had to end. But after that, then I knew what I wanted in a future relationship. I wanted somebody who was going to go along that same path. It wasn't enough for me to just get along with them as a person or to both like the same shows. They had to be on the same life path as me. So that's one thing I learned, and that's how I built standards around that. Let's talk about handling people who don't like your standards. Online, when a woman says her standards and their higher ones, you get a lot of comments that are like, oh, only 0.001% of the population matches that standard, or you should lower your standards, or that's unrealistic, or what do you bring to the table, what are you, like you're a gold digger. So those are some of the kind of comments that can come up from people that don't have the same matching standards. The best response that I've seen to this are posts recently that say, I'm not taking myself off the top shelf just because you can't reach it. If she holds herself and others to high standards, there's zero reason that she should change them just because other people don't like them. Tying into that, let's talk about how to be a match for what you want. Let's say in the case of dating, there's a person who has high standards and they haven't been able to find somebody who is willing and able to meet their standards. Now, some people might say to them, you just haven't found the right person yet. Other people might say to them, guys like that just don't exist in our city. But the harsh truth could be that they just aren't a match for the type of person that their standards are filtering for. So how do you start becoming a match for the person that you want? First, you have to start off by realizing the person that you want has wants too. Let's say that you're a guy and you want a woman who is smart. She's got to be beautiful and she's got to be a loving, caring, kind person. If she's all of these wonderful things and maybe a lot more things that you have that you want, then there's probably a lot of guys that want somebody like that. She has options. So you need to be prepared to be her best option. Show up consistently every day for her. Work on improving where you need to. Be a thoughtful person. Show up in the ways that other guys won't. Now, let's do another example. Let's say that you're a girl who wants the 6-foot man in finance with a trust fund. That's a guy that probably a lot of other women have interest in. So you could say he's a widely desired person. The match for him will probably be somebody else who is widely desired. So something has to set them apart that most people would want to be with them. The match would be having great looks and great confidence. Or it could be knowing how to make their partner feel incredibly at peace, loved, and valued. Another example, let's say that you're a girl who wants the soft girl life, but you have difficulties with receiving. Like the second anybody tries to help you, you're jumping in, you're like, no, I've got it, I can do it myself. Or like, oh, okay, well, if you help me with this, I'm gonna do this. Like you just can't accept things from people without having some kind of anxiety about it. Learn to receive and express gratitude instead of guilt. Like, who would you rather give to? The person who says, oh, no, you don't have to do that for me. Or, oh, you did this? Oh, okay, I'm gonna do things for you. And they're like freaking out about it. Or the person who says, thank you so much. Like, you've made my day. You're so thoughtful. You're wonderful. Pretty clear, right? That's another example of being the match for what it is that you want. You have to be prepared to receive what you want. Now let's talk about another comment that happens a lot when somebody has a lot of standards or high standards. When somebody says their standards, other people might respond, well, aren't you worried about missing out on the right person because you're filtering out so many different people with your standards? I want you to know that this comes from a lack mindset. The people who don't choose to have many standards out of fear that they will lose a lot of people, that's operating from lack. They're saying, oh, okay, I just create this standard. If I put this standard in place, I'm losing out on this person. That person could have been the right one. Well, what about this one? This one? They're worried about the loss of people who aren't even right for them. Abundance mindset looks like knowing if you have right standards, then that will attract a right person. The right person isn't going to be scared off by your standards. If they get scared off, that clearly was not a match for you. The right person will probably even appreciate your standards because it'll be a part of what led to them meeting you. And if they have standards that match that, they'll be glad that you held on to those because now they found somebody who's their match. Now, one of the tricky things with standards can be communicating them and standing by them. In dating, you're gonna get people who don't agree with your standards or who don't have standards that match. Standing by your standards takes a little practice and a whole lot of sureness in what it is that you want. If you really want what you say you want and you feel as though you're deserving of it, you're ready for it, you've made yourself the match for it, it's a lot easier to let go of people who are wrong for you when you meet them in dating. Now, if you haven't had the practice with communicating your standards, then it can feel a little bit trickier. Even if you feel a certainty about them, that's just when you're with yourself, thinking to yourself about them. You're like, yeah, I know my standard. Yeah, like I deserve this, I'm sure of it. But then the second that it comes actually working through that with somebody else, then it can be a little bit challenging if you haven't done it before. But it'll get easier, I promise. Now, if you're newer to communicating your standards or you're not fully committed to them, you might find yourself over-explaining to people who don't agree with them. Like, I remember this one time, I had been on a couple of dates with this guy, and I made it clear the kind of person that I wanted to be with. That was brought up in conversation. And then I got hit with the what do you bring to the table? Because I wasn't used to communicating my standards and feeling fully certain in them, I started off on a long explanation about it, and then it went into like this debate back and forth. If I had been fully secure in what I wanted, or if I had a little bit more practice in communicating what I wanted, then I would have said, I can tell we're not a match. I wish you all the best, and it's been great getting to know you. Now, to my credit, I did end things that night after that back and forth argument over what I bring to the table. So I will credit myself with that at least. But again, communicating standards doesn't look like extreme defensiveness or trying to change the other person's mind or explaining why it is that you're right. There's a sense of acceptance that comes with you really standing by your standards. I hope you enjoyed this little talk about standards, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them in the comments. If you're ready to create the kind of standards that bring in the person that you're looking for, set up a one-on-one with me and we can make it happen. Thanks for listening. Bye. Thanks, honey. We're rolling?
You're rolling.
Cool. I got a long video.
Well, I don't know how much hard drive is on this film still.
Hopefully a lot.